Okay, welcome back. You're listening to the second hour of the weekend edition of the Korelin Economics Report. Time out. Korelin, appreciate you joining me. We're going to talk a little bit about mining in Mexico in this particular segment. Very, very important subject to me because Kathy and I happen to be invested in probably a dozen or so mines in Mexico. Got my friend Dr. Peter Megaw with me right now. Pete is the foremost authority, in my opinion, on mining in this particular country. Pete, you put together a study, specifically you put together a chart which depicts the amount of gold production and silver production in Mexico historically for quite some time. Looking at that chart, I noticed that there was a huge spike in the last few years in terms of gold and silver production. What's going on?
Well, what's going on is that Mexico has been historically underexplored for many years, basically since 1961. This chart you refer to links historic events, technological breakthroughs, discoveries, wars, and so on to silver and gold production in Mexico on a timeline. And what you see is that over the last 5 years, with mines and deposits that have been found for the most part over the last 10 years, that Mexico's gold production has gone from 800,000 ounces a year to 2.7 million, and silver production has gone from around 100 to 160 million ounces of silver a year. So essentially a 50% increase in the production of silver and more than double, actually a triple on the production of gold, and that's because major deposits were found. The permitting and regulatory environment was such that you could put something into production fairly quickly once you found it, and that, obviously all fueled by increased price of silver and gold. So a lot of these are very large-scale mining operations.
You know, Pete, I have to tell you, I have been investing in Mexico for probably, actively, I would have to say, for probably the past 5 or 6 years, okay, and you actually piqued my interest when we were both doing consulting work for the same company, a little gold company up in British Columbia. But you and I started talking silver back in 03, 04 in that area and Mexico, and I have to tell you, I think that the importance of Mexico really isn't realized by enough investors. I think many investors focus on the fact that there's a drug issue down there, for example. There's at times there's violence down in Mexico, but what those folks don't realize is the degree of violence, the degree of the drug problem is fractional compared to the degree of the mining industry to the country. And I have to believe that no government authority in Mexico is going to do anything other than support the mining industry because of what the mining industry gives back to the Mexican people in terms of improving infrastructure, in terms of improving educational systems, and on and on and on. Am I way off base on that?
In a lot of ways, you're quite right. There is the political reality that the government officials are not going to make decisions in favor of large multinational corporations over Mexican, essentially peasant farmers. So there have been some social issues that have arisen in certain cases. Some companies have had some issues with some of those entities simply because the government won't step in. Or is slow to step in, but when they do, they give full support, and typically the problems get resolved. It just takes a little while.
Well, but that was the point I was trying to make, is that with all of the added benefits that the mining industry brings to Mexico, whether you're talking about the state governments, whether you're talking about the local governments, whether you're talking about the national government, the federal government down there, they're pretty damn supportive of the mining industry.
Oh, yes, very much so.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some companies. I happen to be invested in a couple of companies that you're involved in. One of them is a little exploration company called Canaso Resources. Interest of full disclosure, Big Al owns shares in Canaso, which he purchased by writing a check, for lack of better terms. I'm invested through the Encompass Fund in Mag Silver as another example. What are some of in your opinion, 5 or 6 companies that people should take a look at? And if you have an equity interest in them, please disclose that.
Well, Yeah, I have an equity interest in MAG, obviously, as co-founder of the company. A lot depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for companies that have made big discoveries that are moving toward production, MAG is certainly on that.
Definitely.
We've got a plan, an early initial development plan with our partners at Fresnillo, and we expect to be producing silver by 2017. We'll produce an average of 14 million ounces of silver for 14 years once that thing is into production. Exelon Resources, which I also found the deposit. I also have shares in Exelon, has the Platosa deposit. Recently, a press release has come out that sort of near source or more proximal style mineralization has been found, indicating that the system could get a lot bigger fairly soon. Canasil, in which I don't own shares directly, but MAG has a joint venture agreement with them. We can earn 60% of their Esperanza property, and we like that because of the historic width and grade that's been found on the property, and the fact that it's in the Fresnillo silver trend, which is the most productive trend for silver deposits in the world. 10% of all the world's silver comes out of the Fresnillo trend. So I look at companies, and there's other opportunities. If you look within the big belts, the belts of big deposits in Mexico, those are the places where major discoveries will be made. I work with a company called Candente Gold. I'm on their board of directors, so I have shares and options and all of that stuff. They've picked up the El Oro district. They now own 70% of it. They got it from Goldcorp. That's Mexico's historic largest gold-dominated system, produced about 8 million ounces of gold. And because of politics and history, the property has been tied up since the late 50s without anybody really being able to apply modern understanding of vein systems to it. So there's a number of good opportunities out there for companies that are focused on making large-scale, high-grade discoveries. And those are the things that will get you through times of uncertain market conditions and uncertain prices better than anything else.
Absolutely better than anything else. Got a couple of minutes left here, Pete. What drew you to Mexico? Now, you and your family live down in Tucson now, so just a hop, skip, and a jump away from your backyard. Your backyard, so to speak, is your area that you work in. But what drew you to that part of the world?
The people, the food, and the geology. The geologic potential of Mexico and its mineral endowment is absolutely spectacular. So it's a great place to work.
It's a great place to work, and you've obviously had some real success down there. MAG Silver, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but MAG is probably one of the biggest success stories in the silver sector of the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 years.
I wouldn't argue with that characterization.
I think that's obviously very true. We're looking for the same things to happen certainly from some of the smaller exploration companies. Pete, one last question: where do you see the price of gold and silver in the midterm? And I would define the midterm of over the next 3 years. And why?
Well, I don't claim to have a crystal ball, and when I have made predictions like this in the past, I've almost always been wrong to one degree or another. I would prefer to go back and say I look for deposits that would have made money under $4.50 silver price and $350 gold. And if I can find things that would make money under those prices, I don't have to worry that much about whether silver goes up or gold goes up 10, 15, 20% or goes down 20 or 30%. I'm still well over the bar. So that's why philosophically my exploration style is go for grade, stay with grade, and then you get to sleep at night.
Go for grade, stay with grade, and then you get to sleep at night. There's really absolutely no question whatsoever about that. That leads me back to a conversation that I had probably, 4 or 5 or no, longer than that, 7 or 8 years ago. Gold was somewhere in, approaching $500 an ounce or thereabouts, and the price of gold started to go up, then it flipped back down again. And I reminded listeners who expressed a certain amount of trepidation about the industry, I said, you know what, anytime you have a company that's profitable at $450 gold and commensurate at a commensurate value in silver, you're going to be able to sleep at night. Pete, thanks so much, my friend.